शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अथाश्वलायनो भगवन्तं परमेष्ठिनमुपसमेत्योवाच अधीहि भगवन् ब्रह्मविद्यां वरिष्ठां सदा सद्भिः सेव्यमानां निगूढाम् यया चिरात् सर्वपापं व्यपोह्य परात् परं पुरुषं याति विद्वान् तस्मै स होवाच पितामहश्च श्रद्धा भक्तिध्यानयोगादवैः न कर्मणा न प्रजया धनेन त्यागेनैके अमृतत्वमानशुः परेण नाकं निहितं गुहायां विभ्राजते यद्यतयो विशन्ति वेदान्त विज्ञान सुनिश्चितार्थाः सन्न्यासयोगाद्यतयः शुद्धसत्त्वाः ते ब्रह्मलोकेषु परान्तकाले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ति सर्वे विविक्तदेशे च सुखासनस्थः शुचिः समग्रीव शिरः शरीरः अत्याश्रमस्थः सकलेन्द्रियाणि निरुध्य भक्त्या स्वगुरुं प्रणम्य हृत्पुण्डरीकं विरजं विशुद्धं विचिन्त्य मध्ये विशदं विशोकम् अचिन्त्यमव्यक्तमनन्तरूपं शिवं प्रशान्तममृतं ब्रह्मयोनिम् तथादिमध्यान्तविहीनमेकं विभुं चिदानन्दमरूपमद्भुतम् उमासहायं परमेश्वरं प्रभुं त्रिलोचनं नीलकण्ठं प्रशान्तम् ध्यात्वा मुनिर्गच्छति भूतयोनिं समस्तसाक्षिं तमसः परस्तात् स ब्रह्मा स शिवः सेन्द्रः सोऽक्षरः परमस्वराट् स एव विष्णुः स प्राणः स कालोऽग्निः स चन्द्रमाः स एव सर्वं यद्भूतं यच्च भव्यं सनातनम् ज्ञात्वा तं मृत्युमत्येति नान्यः पन्था विमुक्तये सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि सम्पश्यन् ब्रह्म परमं याति नान्येन हेतुना.
See, the Bhagavad Gita starts with the first chapter of Arjuna Vishada, or despondency of Arjuna's state. And most of the chapter he talks. A few verses Sanjaya talks. Sri Bhagavan Vacha doesn't come in the first chapter. In fact, according to Sanjaya, he reports that Lord Krishna says, Pashyaitan Samavetan Kurunati. Just behold the Kurus, says Krishna when Arjuna says, take my chariot in between the two armies. So the only words he says in that chapter is just see them, just look at them, behold them. That's all it is. Otherwise there is no Bhagavan Vacha in the first chapter. And we also said it is more of psychological and lessons on body language, etc. that we can derive from first chapter. And it is describing the condition of a person who is completely overpowered by emotions, and therefore it is the beginning of Gita. Because unless otherwise we understand our present state, how can we go to reach the real state? And chapter 2 onwards, the philosophy and the great knowledge begins, and Lord Krishna gives a brilliant exposition of Brahma Vidya throughout the 17 chapters that follows. But the 13th verse of first chapter is a very beautiful verse. It says, Tata Shvetair Hayai Rukte Mahati Syandane Stithau Madhavah Pandavascheva Divyan Shankau Pradadmatu. It gives the picture of the entry point of Krishna and Arjuna. There you see, because initial 10 verses is talking about what Duryodhana is doing and what he is saying, etc. And then Bhishma blows the conch to boost the fallen enthusiasm of Duryodhana, and responding to Bhishma's blowing of the conch, everybody blows the conch. And then Kauravas all respond as a Pratidwani, or the echo of that, accepting the challenge. The Pandavas are going to blow the conch. Just before that, like how a hero is shown in the movie, and particularly in South, if you know how Rajinikanth movies are there and how he is introduced in the first scene, that is a very grand scene, and the whole theatre erupts when that is done. Or any hero for that matter, right from beginning of Indian cinema, we know that. Maybe even foreign movies, there is a entry of James Bond or something like that. Like that, the entry of Krishna and Arjuna is given in that verse. That yoked to the white horses in that great chariot, Krishna and Arjuna are there. And then they first start by blowing the conch, and then all others also join the chorus. And that sound reverberates, he says. Why is that verse given, and what is the significance of that? Is that is the picture that we need to have in mind as we study Gita throughout. Gita is giving us various points of explanation and reflection. It gives a lot of ideas for us to think. It is giving the great knowledge of the self itself, which is meant for contemplation and reflection. But before we get on to any study, there is a dhyanam or a picturization about what it is all about. So if you are able to picturize how Krishna is there and Arjuna is there and how Krishna is imparting the Gita, it fills our heart with that sort of a devotion as we studied Gita. Gita Jayanti was recent. Remember that? That was the day Gita was given out. So as we even chant Gita, as we even study Gita, this picturization of the battlefield in which Krishna is giving the knowledge to Arjuna in the form of Bhagavad Gita must be remembered. Exactly like that, whenever we study the Upanishads, just try to picturize these surroundings or settings, which is not given in description here, but you have to just imagine the great, in this case, in Kaivalya Upanishad, the great Lord Brahma is the Guru. Imagine Lord Brahma sitting in the lotus with Vedas, all reveling in the knowledge of the self. And to him the great disciple Aashvalaayana went, and he is submitting himself and asking the question. That must be the picture that we have in mind as we study the Upanishads. As we said, the more we try to explain, the more we try to have classes on it, it may even sort of dilute not the message of the Upanishad, but the spirit of how the knowledge was transacted in the ancient times. We have to get inspired by the preparedness of the student and the greatness of the master. Probably that thought will elevate us. Along with that, you study the Upanishad. Along with that, you think about the concepts that is given. Along with that, the whole idea is to get into the meditation of the consciousness which is hidden in these Upanishads. The purpose is not to just to have a understanding of the Sanskrit mantras that are given here. Of course, they reveal the Brahman, But along with that, in and through that, we have to find the hidden treasure which is there in the Upanishad, which is nothing but the pure consciousness. Therefore, the spirit in which it was transacted, as close to as possible, if we can reach our thought, reach our mind, it will be a very great feeling for us. Then the study itself is elevated like that. So that must be the feeling when we study the Upanishad, not just in class, even when you do the early morning study by yourself, which is the most important thing. Sit for a couple of minutes in that sort of dhyanam, in that meditation of that surroundings, etc. And then you will find that you will be able to get into the spirit. It is not possible, that suddenly you sit in a desk and you start reading. It doesn't immediately tune into that frequency. So that picturization must be always in mind as we study this Brahma Vidya. The Shanti Mantra, we saw in the last class that it is talking about how the senses and all aspects of our personality is attuned to gaining this knowledge. So may there be peace at all levels. May the gods bless us. May they make us get attuned to the subject at all levels, at the level of our limbs, at the level of our mind, gross intellect and subtle intellect. Yes, sir.
I was wondering why there is no verse on Drona Vacha in the first chapter.
Why?
After all, he goes and cries in front of the commander-in-chief, and he never responds anything.
That is his response. His response is silence. Actually, he is making Duryodhana just turn introvert and see what he is talking about or prattling about. So that is the objectivity of the Guru. And in fact, he himself sort of insults, not insults in that sense, but he is talking very low of him. So why would a Guru even respond at all? But they are simply doing their duty. In fact, that is what Krishna does to Arjuna throughout first chapter. He is just allowing him to pour out his emotions. He doesn't respond at all. He is, first thing is, in that case, any knowledge that is transacted also will not go through. So he is just allowing Arjuna to pour out all his emotions in the first chapter. Right. We'll chant mantra 1 twice.
अथाश्वलायनो भगवन्तं परमेष्ठिनमुपसमेत्योवाच अधीहि भगवन्तं विद्यां वरिष्ठां सदा सद्भिः सेव्यमानां निगूढाम् यया चिरात् सर्वपापं व्यपोह्य परात् परं पुरुषं याति विद्वान् अथाश्वलायनो भगवन्तं परमेष्ठिनमुपसमेत्योवाच अधीहि भगवन्तं विद्यां वरिष्ठां सदा सद्भिः सेव्यमानां निगूढाम् यया चिरात् सर्वपापं व्यपोह्य परात् परं पुरुषं याति विद्वान्.
Then Aashvalaayana, having approached the venerable Lord Brahma, said, O blessed Lord, teach me the supreme knowledge of Brahman, sought constantly by the wise, a profound secret by which the wise, erelong discarding all sin, reach the supreme being, greater than the great. The mantra starts with, as I said, the word Atha. Atha means then. Not only here, in some other places also it starts with that. I think in Brahma Sutra, Vedavyasa begins with Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Now we shall inquire into Brahman. Then means it is very clear that the student is well prepared to take in the knowledge. And all the preparations and qualifications that are necessary to gain the knowledge, he has already done the homework. And then he approaches. It is said Aashvalaayana himself was a great rishi or some great soul in the Rigvedic time. So he was not an ordinary person. He has finished all his karma. He has finished every duty, etc., that has to be done in this world. Afterwards, there is an inquiry that is there. So, Atha in general, we can take that the qualities that are required for a person to get into the study of Upanishad or Brahma Vidya. We saw in Tattva Bodha these qualities are dealt in detail. We will go through them in brief. And let us remember these qualities, any one quality, if we have it even 100%, we are already there. We are already in the self. So what it means is, at the relative level, we can encourage ourselves that to the extent that we possess these qualities, to the extent that we have these qualities, to that extent we will be able to attune to the knowledge of the Upanishad. So it should not be taken as a disqualification if we don't have these qualities, but our aim must be to get into these qualities as much as possible. The first quality is Viveka. Viveka is discrimination between what is real and what is unreal. Intellect is the faculty that human being alone possesses, and all the other creatures don't have this faculty. So the basic intellect is when we start discriminating between what is right and what is wrong in this world. Even in this world, for us to understand what gives us long-term benefit and what gives us short-term benefit, there needs to be some insight, there needs to be some vision, some sort of a discrimination. So that is the basic intellect that we are talking about. But at a very great level, when you understand that there is something that is beyond this world which is permanent, everything in this world is impermanent. A Viveka is a constant reflection between that which is permanent and that which is impermanent. That is real Viveka. As a natural consequence of which, an associated quality is the next one, which is Vairagya. So, Vairagya, I would say of the four qualities, Vairagya is very important or most important. Most of us with discrimination and with Shravana or listening also of basic text, because the real Shravana Manana comes later, of even mind, intellect, all those things that we study, we may develop a certain amount of clarity and certain amount of discrimination. But the capacity to hold on to what is permanent and discard what is impermanent, that is not very easy. Because the attachment that we have towards and the vasanas that we are carrying for maybe many janmas will not easily allow us to just go by what the intellect says. So intellect will keep on shouting one thing, but the mind will operate on a different realm altogether. So therefore, Vairagya is that capacity to say firmly a no to those obstacles which come into your path. That is why I said, once we catch hold of this quality, of course every quality is connected, all other qualities easily come up. When we study, it is very clear and it is very not a great rocket science to understand the basic principles. The moment you move out of the study table, the power of the senses and the power of the mind is too much that we are not able to have that dispassionate attitude. Here, dispassion is not a hatred for any being, because this can be misunderstood that Vairagya is having because they are obstacles that you have a hatred. It is a distaste towards those things which are creating obstacle in your path, not a hatred towards any being. So that capacity is not got because the object of your choice is not available. They are there. And you also have the capacity to enjoy. And also there is no restriction, etc. on you to enjoy. Despite all these things, you take a firm stance that, no, this is not for me now. That capacity in a person is called as Vairagya. To get this, actually, it is important that we get a taste for what is good for us. unless we get a taste for what is good for us, it is difficult to avoid what is really harmful for us. It is, say suppose you say, you have a viral fever, so they say you take in some home remedy, I don't know, whatever it is, some medicine, and then you say you avoid ice cream, or you avoid cold water, something like that they say. Even if you don't take the medicine, the effect is not going to be that much. But if you take ice cream, or if you take that cold water at that point of time, the effect will be much more. So avoidance of what is coming into our path is of much more importance. Therefore, just try to quote what is really good for, in other words, what is right for you. When the intellect says, there must be a parallel liking of that by mind. Mind doesn't automatically like it, but the Vairagya, if you want to have it from the other things, you must develop a liking for it. In the liberal education also we said, unless a person really likes a subject, how is he going to study that subject? How is he going to get interested in that subject? So what we are seeking as the self, in a way that you want to reach it, develop a liking for it. Let us put it positively. So then you have the capacity to withdraw yourself away from what is really a harmful thing. So that capacity of dispassion, that dispassionate attitude, that detachment is called as Vairagya. Meaning, you are not interested in any fruit of action that accrues to you in this world or hereafter. Hereafter means it can be a future fruit in heaven or something like that. If we carefully analyze certain people who say they are guided by their own scriptures, and they may move away from certain things, and they may even give up their life in the name of religion, etc. But they are maybe very much motivated by what they get in Jannat, heaven. And that pleasure is 100 times or 1000 times described as 100 times or 1000 times the pleasure that we enjoy here. But it is still different in degree, that's about all. So his eyes are on that. You cannot call such a person as a Vairagi. A Vairagya comes when you understand what is the futility of the fruit, whether you get it in this world or hereafter, which can be in Swarga, etc. That capacity to distance yourself from that is Vairagya. Viveka and Vairagya act as two pedals. With more Viveka, more Vairagya should come. With more Vairagya, more Viveka should develop. Then once a person's basic preparation is like this, and before he enters into the study, a ornamentation of wealth of 6 qualities is given. Shad Sampatti, Shama, which is a mastery over the mind and its vagaries, a basic control over the mind. Dhamma, which is the same control with reference to the external senses. So Shama and Dhamma with reference to the flow of the mind being restricted internally and externally. And then comes Uparama. Uparama is a state of withdrawal of the mind. This withdrawal of the mind comes by practicing Swadharma. Whatever is your area of activity, once you get completely into it, there will be automatic withdrawal from the world. It's a sense of withdrawal. In Vairagya, you can say that there is a distaste for something which is obstacle or which is a block in your way. In case of Uparama, there is no thought of what you like or dislike or anything like that. It's a complete sense of withdrawal from the world. And when you go through all these things, there will be pleasure and pain, sorrow and joy. You have to put up with it with pleasure. That is called as Titiksha. Titiksha is the capacity of endurance. See, it is interesting that he says that to put up with a displeasure we can understand. Why we should put up with a pleasure also? If you have winter, if you have summer, let's say in a place like Chennai, you put up with it. You go through it. Don't complain about it. but very rarely we get winter, or very short period we get. Why not enjoy it? He says Sukha, Dukkha, Shita, Ushna, all pairs of opposite, just endure. Why should we endure pleasant things? Because if we start even showing some inclination towards the enjoyment of pleasant things, chances are that you will get attached to that also. So, let it be as it is. You are not having a special like or a dislike or anything. You just see it pass by as it is. That capacity to put up with pleasure what is a pain and other aspects in life is endurance. It is not going to be easy in the path. Therefore, this quality of endurance really prepares us harder. And then comes the grandest quality, Shraddha, which we will take it up in detail, because in Mantra 2 he is going to talk about Shraddha. But in that Shraddha, we can say Shraddha is operating at two levels. One is the initial Shraddha or the faith, where we get into the spiritual path itself. When a person is having some sort of inadequacy in the world, and he has faith in some master or a guru or a scripture, and then he goes into it with faith, that is the starting point of Shraddha. But this Shraddha is a quality that you need to have throughout your journey. There is a different type of Shraddha that is required at the advanced stage. Probably Aashvalaayana, when he is talking about Shraddha in the second mantra, he is talking about that Shraddha. So Shraddha is a ultimate faith in what the Guru and the scriptures say, and the Guru doesn't say anything apart from what the scripture says. That full faith with which you go till the end of the journey. Faith in the English word covers one aspect of Shraddha, okay, which is an important aspect, but it is not the full meaning of Shraddha. So with faith, you take up the knowledge with determination, with conviction, and till the point of reaching the goal, you hold that Vishwas and that conviction that it has to get converted into a subjective knowledge. Till that point, what comes along with you is Shraddha. Once it gets converted into knowledge, there is no more faith. That is why, by definition, what religion is called as faith in the Western language, you belong to Christian faith or Islamic faith, that faith is a blind faith. When we say blind faith, faith by definition is blind. What is blind faith there? It is unverifiable faith. What you say as advent of Jesus Christ and the salvation that they talk about, or a Janma that you go through, and then there is a eternal hell, and then all these things cannot be really verified, but a person can have faith in it. If he believes 100% that Jesus Christ will save him, probably his life can be saved. So actually faith in Jesus Christ is more important than Jesus Christ himself. Faith has that power. But by definition, that faith has no substantiation or proof. What is the difference between that and Shraddha? Shraddha is also faith. But once you walk along the path, you are able to understand that relevance and get it converted into your system so that you begin to experience. Once you begin to experience certain things in you, you don't have faith anymore, you know it. So therefore the faith in the unknown becomes stronger. Then you go further. That becomes known. Then your faith in the unknown becomes even more stronger. Like this, it is like walking the path and going towards the goal. Till that point, what actually increases in you in terms of gaining knowledge, that is called as Shraddha. So Gita says in most places, or in one important verse, it says Shraddhavan labate jnanam. It is a person with Shraddha who gains knowledge. And the opposite also it says Samshayatma vinashyati. A person who keeps on doubting, he perishes. So Shraddha is a very important quality. And finally, in the Shad Sampatti, what comes is Samadhana. Samadhana is tranquility of mind, a single-pointedness. A equanimity which comes with a single-pointed thought that this is what it is. Once the mind becomes single-pointed, it is without any chanchal or without any movement or anything. So it is absolute equanimity of the mind. Now all these qualities doesn't come one after the other. They are all simultaneously developed, but one can be related to the other also. But these can be understood as distinct qualities as well. And then finally, the fourth quality is Mumukshatva. Mumukshatva is that capacity to be dissatisfied in whatever the world offers, and you are yearning for liberation. That intense desire for liberation. Recently, we saw a informal group discussion of Swamiji, and this is what he has been of late addressing various, not necessarily in the public, but the alumni and other people who he is meeting, and maybe some serious seekers, that what we get into life beyond a point after certain spiritual sadhana is complacency. And he says opposite of complacency is Mumukshatva. It's a very interesting thought that he gave. That complacency is not just that what we normally understand is, yes, everything is I'll take care. That sort of not indifferent attitude alone he is talking about. You ask somebody, how is he or he or she? They say, I'm well. Or you may have certain deficiencies. This has to be done. Daughter's marriage is over. Or this particular education has to be finished. Or I have to get just this loan cleared. Or something like that. And then they feel alright. He says that feeling of alright is complacency. It is complacency. So a burning desire to liberate oneself, a sense of incompleteness must be always lurking there within you, that should not die till you reach self-realization. That, he says, cannot be given by any master. In fact, that fire is there within all of us. That spark of liberation is there within all of us. It cannot be lit by anybody outside. So that to keep it glowing all the time is the capacity of Mumukshatva. That intense desire. Because you think about anything in this world, that everybody seeks freedom. All this movement of women's freedom, this freedom and that freedom, everything is an external manifestation of what is inherently there within us to be just free. But we feel that I am free enough and I am in my comfort zone, and in that process, when we lose sight of the goal, we lose this, we lose the pursuit itself. Having got into this human life, which is very rare, and having got into the right frame of mind to even pursue Shastra, and you get a good satsang, and then you get a good master, all this filters down to you are being in a very small crowd. You are one of a very rare group. Having come all along, if you tend to slacken, if you don't keep that fire burning within you, it is a colossal waste. That's what in Kena Upanishad we studied as Mahati Vinashti. Mahati Vinashti is a supremely great loss which cannot be measured, which cannot be explained. So having come so far, why we will lose that? So to keep that fire burning in you is called as Mumukshatva. In fact, whenever Shraddha lackens also, what will push that is this Mumukshatva. Mumukshatva is that burning desire. With everything in the world, we feel that once I get this, it will be over. Once I get this, it will be okay. That never actually gets. What Swamiji says is, we say settle down means you are settled deep down in some pit. That's all it is. There's no such thing as settle down. There must be that fire that always pushes us upwards. The next Upanishad is called Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka means a person who is completely bald, who has no hair, who has shaven off all his hair is a Mundaka. And it generally represents a sannyasi, Mundaka. Okay. The picturization there is just as in Kaivalya Upanishad you say that Brahma and Aashvalaayana. You imagine a person having a earthen pot which is very hot with pieces of burning charcoal inside, and he is carrying that pot on his head. How can that be? It is representative of the fire within him to reach the self. That capacity is called as Mumukshatva. That burning desire is called as Mumukshatva. Just as when you understand that a golden prison is still a prison, that I don't belong to this prison, I have to go get out somewhere. That yearning, that constant thought, which is aspect of our subtle intellect, is called as Mumukshatva. All these qualities are there in Aashvalaayana. Aashvalaayana is said to be son of Aashvalaayana, and he indicates that he is a well-prepared student with all these qualities. Such a committed seeker, with no other interest, he approaches Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma is described as Parameshtin. Parameshtin means he is the principal, he is the topmost in the rank of, he is the teacher of teachers. He is there in the teacher of heavens. Brahma Loka is the ultimate, Brahma is there. Bhagavantam or the Shabda Bhagavan is representative of one who has these 6 qualities. Just as we say Shad Sampatti or wealth of qualities for a seeker, these 6 qualities are given for the Bhagavan. Bhagavan, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan, wherever the Bhagavati, the sound is there, that has all these 6 qualities. Then only the title Bhagavan can be given. Aishwaryam, which is absolute might. Dharma, which is the personification of laws or righteousness. Dharma has no exact translation. Yasha, glory. In Vibhuti Yoga he says, whatever is fame that is seen in the world, it is an aspect of small percentage of my glory, small ansha of my glory. Yasha. Shri, wealth, affluence. And Jnanam, Vairagya, non-attachment. All these 6 qualities whoever has, he is called as a Bhagavan. Here Lord Brahma is addressed as Bhagavantam. He is having this 4 heads. He is picturized as a god with 4 heads, having Vedas in his hands. What it means is, he is the master of the 4 Vedas. He is the personification of the truth that is revealed in the 4 Vedas. And he is the God with complete knowledge. That is why Saraswati is married to Lord Brahma. He is the Lord of creation. Unless otherwise a person has knowledge of everything, how can he create everything? It is just not possible. So he is as such a all-knower. And in the sense of Brahma Vidya, he is the knowing principle himself. He is the conscious principle himself. To such great teacher, the student humbly submits himself and he says, teach me the supreme knowledge of Brahman. The student has no other interest. Adihi Bhagavan Brahma Vidyam Varishtam. He teach me Brahma Vidya. That is no other doubt or anything, or he is not asking for any other thing in the world. Only teach me Brahma Vidya. Very direct question. And then he qualifies Brahma Vidya with couple of adjectives here. Why is it that he is qualifying us? To indicate that he is not casually asking something. Okay, I have 15 minutes now, can you tell me some Brahma Vidya? It's not a very casual thing. It is not to be discussed like that. He knows the full value of it, and he has come up to that point yearning and seeking for it in a very righteous way, in the proper way. So he is indicating that knowledge which is constantly sought by the wise. Sada Sadbhi Sevyamanam. The wise people, the good people always seek this. The implication of this statement is, those who seek this are wise. Those who are seeking Brahma Vidya are the real wise persons, are real Sats. Sat means the real good persons, real wise persons. So, This knowledge is constantly sought by the wise. Constantly means without any break. It is not that they will try this for some time and then if it doesn't come, no. There is a constant seeking of this knowledge by the wise. Nigudam, it's a profound secret. This knowledge is a profound secret because only very, very few people know it. It is not known, just not known. Now, even with the advent of all the Google and everything where the whole universe is connected, even you send a link to those people to read the Upanishad or listen to a lecture like this in YouTube, it is just not possible. Always there will be a very, very small percentage who even know about the existence of this knowledge and they know this knowledge. Therefore, it is a profound secret. Not just that. The subject matter that is dealt with this, which is the self, always remains a secret. The greatest secret, again in 10th chapter Krishna says, the greatest secret is Maunam. Maunam chaivasmi guhyanam, he says. I am the silence among all the secret. So therefore, however much you try, you cannot reveal this. Even if it is revealed, it cannot be understood. We can have a big class like this or a great congregation also, and you can record that and spread it even further. It just cannot be said, it just cannot be revealed. That stands as it is. So therefore, unless a person reaches there and realizes by himself, it is just not captured. You cannot even use the word understood, everything. It is just a matter of subjective apprehension or realization. So it always remains a great secret. And as I said, in the relative level also, very few people know it. It is a secret. Yaya chirat sarva papam vyapohya, by which achirat means erlong. Erlong means before you, just like that. Before you even can think of it. Just like that. That means he is saying, knowing this, all the sins can go just like this. It's very interesting. Just tell me that immediately first, I'll just do. It is not that it has to come from some master or anything that is going to be pushed into you from outside or you gain it by some action or anything, not like that. It is there actually within you all the time. You have to just realize it. The moment you realize it, everything is gone just like that. Achirat. Achirat means just like that. Not long. But since now we are searching for it, you think you are very far from it, there is a distance that we need to travel. But the moment you understand it is within me, how long does it take for a darkness to go the moment you bring in light? Even if the cave is dark for 10,000 years, nobody has ventured into that. The first ray of light immediately takes away the darkness. It doesn't say at least 2 months we have to wait. Nothing like that. Immediate. So the knowledge of the self immediately removes all the papa from you. Papa here means the source of all the karma, which is the vasanas. Papa or sin is a state of mental agitation which is caused by the thought flow which comes from the vasanas. All those things which are going to further fructify in you and come out as your personality, everything is going to be burnt off in a moment. That is the power of this knowledge. Parat param purusham yati vidwan. It is the greatest of the greatest. Parat param, knowledge of the self. There is no comparison. It is the highest of the highest. So, Aashvalaayana indicates that he knows something about it like this, but what it is exactly he doesn't know. So please teach me that. In fact, this is how all the Mumukshus approach the master and ask for the knowledge. Nachiketas in Katha Upanishad, next Shaunaka, great householder in the Mundaka Upanishad. All of them are very clear as to the limitations of the world. All of them suspect there is something else, and that everybody is seeking, great people are seeking, they are able to know it. But what exactly is, they don't know. So they approach a master who is actually reveling in that, submit themselves, and then seek for that knowledge only. So the student is well qualified, the teacher is greatly qualified, and what does the teacher say in mantra 2? Yes, sir.
No, I just wanted to find out whether it's the same thing as what Nachiketa was insisting on.
Same thing.
One idea.
Same thing. Nothing else. In fact, even when Yama was offering him other temptations, with a sort of a rock solid mind, he rejected everything and he said, I want this one. When he offered horses, when he offered everything else as entertainment, he said, I don't know, you can keep it. That sort of a single pointed focus. So Nachiketa is very inspiring because a young boy goes in search of it like that. Nachiketa is more of a exception to the rule as an adhikari, I am saying, as an adhikari. But they are very, very inspiring. When you see somebody who is a mumukshu at a very young age and he is going in search of the self-knowledge, nothing can be more inspiring than that. And so Nachiketa is considered in the spiritual lobby as the ideal student. It's a very, very great and ideal student as far as Brahma Vidya is concerned.
But in his case, Nachiketa's case, something triggered it off. Some indiscretion by his father triggered it off. Whereas in case of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, nothing like that happened. But he himself had the inclination. So would we say that Ramakrishna was greater in that respect?
No, there is no comparison with reference to Nachiketa or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. But the point is, at various points of time, how the urge comes it can be, as you said, it can be triggered. But there is a fully, like a volcano waiting to burst from inside. A small spark or something can come from outside, but it is that thing which is inside that has to open up. Similarly, whatever is all the Purva Karma and everything that Paramahamsa has done and the state of mind from a very young age that he showed towards this, it is the same thing. And it could have been triggered by something. But all of them are a very well qualified persons who seek nothing else except this.
Sir,
Yes.
that he said there could be 10,000 years of darkness in a cave and one light removes that. So if we say that darkness is ignorance, this question has been confusing. Ignorance is not in degrees, it is there, right? And knowledge is in degrees, right?
See, okay, carry on.
I just want to understand, I keep getting confused that how can there knowledge be in degrees and ignorance be not in degrees?
See, when we say knowledge, when we refer to the knowledge as the absolute knowledge of the self, it is not in degrees. Okay. It is that alone, and it is like a waking state of consciousness vis-a-vis in the dream. It is either you wake up or you are dreaming or you are sleeping. Waking stage does not come in that you are little 50% awake, 50% sleep, or then 75%, then 90%. It doesn't come like that. So knowledge in that ultimate sense of supreme knowledge is not in degree. It is just knowledge. That's about all. Therefore, all of us who have not gained that absolute knowledge of the self, which is the state of self-realization, all of us are in the realm of ignorance. This ignorance, we can say, differs in various degrees. A person can be in a absolute state of, this thing, completely oblivious to anything in the world or reacting to anything in the world. He is in a very deep state of tamas. There are other people who are at a very high stages of evolution. You cannot say both of them are same with reference to the relative reality of the world. One is going towards this side, one is going towards this side, let us say. Both of them are not same. Yes, you can say both are ignorant of the self from that angle. So, it is exactly like how people argue in terms of, a basket which has 95% rotten fruits and it is completely getting destroyed. 5% normal fruits are there. Another basket has 5% rotten fruits and 95% are okay fruits. Will you say both these baskets are rotten?
It will be rotten anyway.
Sorry?
After some time, they'll be rotten.
At present, with reference to your consumption or how they can be protected or something, will you put them both in the same category? A basket in which, let us say you even don't have easy access, it has to be difficult, with difficulty you have to separate. The chances of saving this basket with 95% good fruits is much more, and it's easy to take those rotten things away and save these things. But here there is a sort of no chance or less chance to save, so the entire thing is going to go away. It is, to give an example in practical terms, if there is a political party A and the political party B, both of them have corrupt elements. If party A has been bathing in the waters of corruption for last 50 years and it is 95% or 99%, everybody in the genes it has come. For generations it has been practiced. Therefore, you can say it is a corrupt party. The other party, let us say, which is having 10% or 20% corruption, there are corrupt elements there also. But chances of revival of this party, chances of weeding out and regenerating and reinvigorating this party is there much more. So with reference to comparison, you can't say both are corrupt. In fact, this is the argument that is going on in the present world if you carefully notice. You cannot paint everything. With reference to the ultimate self, even ant and Lord Brahma, let us say, assuming I am not talking about this Lord Brahma who is representation of the self, as a individual, all are same. You can say because they all have individuality. But in practical sense, the ant and Brahma are not same. A person who is in the ladder of evolution and the person who has no clue of what evolution or self or knowledge or anything, they are not the same. Absolutely. A person who knows what dharma in life and righteousness in life, and a person who is caught up in selfishness and other scrupulous means by which he is living, they are not the same. So from practical point of view, you can say ignorance has these degrees. Knowledge of the self is one, it is absolute. Once that is lit, the entire sin, as far as that individual is concerned, sin we use it in terms of his accumulated karma, that which has the potential to manifest as his desires and agitations, all that is completely destroyed. A person, Swami Ramtirtha gives this example, a very interesting thought. A person is going through punishment in jail. He has to serve, let's say, 10 years sentence in jail. 4th year he dies there in the jail. What happens to the rest of the 6 years of punishment? It's wiped out automatically. It's exactly like that. When your individuality dies a death, what happens to all the karma, which is what we say as sanchita karma and other thing? It just gets wiped out. There's no need for you to, you have to wait to fructify and this and that. It is a never-ending cycle. So the knowledge of the self, when it is there, when you realize as it is, everything is wiped out instantly. That is what is meant by an instantaneous thing. And there is no liberation except through knowledge. This is agreeable to all schools of thought. When we say all schools of thought, all dharmic schools of thought. You can vary with reference to what that liberation is. You can say whether it is going to Vaikuntha or whether you are becoming one with God, you can becoming all those things, that is clear. But where there is no differentiation in all the schools of thought is, that only by knowledge that you gain liberation, and that is instantaneous. So it is, the differentiation is not in, I'll tell you where your confusion comes from. The confusion comes from understanding that ignorance with reference to the example that we give about light and darkness. We say darkness is nothing but absence of light. But what we experience as darkness, there is still light. When you cannot see in dark, owl is able to see, or cat is able to see. When cat or owl is seeing, they also cannot see without light. So light is there. That light which is visible for them is not visible for you. So you say it is dark. So therefore, we say that darkness that we explain or understand in terms of our regular perception is nothing but difference in degree compared to the light, compared to the daylight. That is so see, sun is here and earth is here. When earth is not facing, that part of the earth which is not facing the sun, that side is night. But sun rays are actually spreading everywhere. So even from this, when you look at the sky, there are certain things that are getting blinking or something like that. So there is some rays of light here or there. And that which can get reflected in this and that, it can come to your place also in a very, very faint way, which will not be identifiable for your eyesight. Your ears have a certain frequency within which they operate. Similarly, eye also operates with a certain frequency. So you can say that is darkness. But some other creature sees means there is. So if cat is also not able to see, something else sees, let us say, there is again a difference in degree. So therefore, there is no such thing as absolute darkness from our relative experience in the world. What we experience in deep sleep is different. Okay, therefore, in this example, if you compare, then you say light is in different degree. Therefore, you all say knowledge is also in different degree. That is not the comparison here. The point is, the absolute knowledge of the self has no other thing to compare with in degree. It is just either you are woken up or you are asleep. Like that it is.
Coming to the point of Sanchita Vasana, will they get wiped out? Or their wiping out gives you a realization state?
Is bringing in light taking away the darkness, or darkness goes first and then light comes in?
Bringing in light.
It is. Knowledge of the self alone liberates. We will conclude with the bhajans here.
Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Jayananda Mukunda Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Govinda Madhava Gopala Keshava Govinda Madhava Gopala Keshava Giridhari Giridhari Jaya Radhe Gopala Madhava Gopala Keshava Gopala Keshava Gopala Keshava.
Poornam Adah Poornamidam Poornat Poornamudachyate Poornasya Poornamadaya Poornamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.